Hello there, and welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. I'm TJ Hoisington, and I have a new success interview for you.
You already know. My passion and my mission to help you unleash your greatness within. My heart goes out to the underdogs that's on their way. If you think you can go from good to great, okay, let's motivate. GreatnessWithin.com. TJ Hoisington. GreatnessWithin.com.
In today's success interview, I was privileged to interview Harvard professor, forward thinker, researcher, Thales Teixeira. He's just come out with a new book called Unlocking the Customer Value Chain. You want to get this book, especially if you're a leader, if you are an entrepreneur. I'll tell you what, in this interview, and in the book, of course, but in this interview, we talk about how to protect yourself from losing market share, but we also talk about strategies for maintaining your market share and even growing your market share. I'll tell you what, he shares all kinds of ideas and strategies that will help you as a leader, as an entrepreneur. So watch it through to the very end. Now, let me just say, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you go to my podcast on iTunes. All you gotta do is type in my name and you'll find the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. And if you're listening to it there and you wanna watch the interview, hey, jump over to YouTube and you can see the interview there as well. Just type in my name on YouTube, TJ Hoisington. Pretty simple. All right, without any further ado, you're going to enjoy this interview, especially if you're a forward thinker and you want to maintain that competitive edge for your business, for your company, or as an individual. There's some nuggets in here that will really be useful for you. So let's jump right into the interview. Thales, welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast.
Thank you, TJ. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. You know, one of the things that we do on this podcast is we get the opportunity of interviewing all kinds of thought leaders like yourself. I've read your book. What an amazing book that you've got. Forward thinking. We'll get into that today. Unlocking the Customer Value Chain. It's going to really be great. A lot of nuggets in there that I hope you get into in this interview. For leaders, those running companies and so forth. But I want to back up and just say, give us a little bit of your backstory. What's your history?
Sure. So I'm originally from Brazil. It's a pretty big country in the south of the equator, for those who don't know it. I came to the U.S. in 2004 to do a PhD at the University of Michigan. Coming from a warm country to the cold Midwest was a big challenge for me. Learning statistics and math and learning to do research and marketing, that was easy compared to the frigid colds, but I managed to survive and thrive. And I actually did my dissertation on using eye tracking to understand how people watch TV ads in order to improve and capture their attention. So based on this innovation, the Harvard Business School in Boston hired me in 2009 to be at the time an assistant professor. I've been there for about 10 years. The first 5 years of my career, I did research on what I've eventually termed the economics of attention. Basically, how to understand how to capture consumer attention online, on TV, and many media, and how to capture that, how to harness it, how to buy it effectively if you're a big company. You're essentially buying eyeballs, and you try to convert that into both sales and building a brand over time. So how to do that effectively, that's the economics of attention. I have a website on that. But the last 5 years, I've been dedicating to understand digital disruption, why it happens, what causes it, how can startups engineer disruption to try to combat big companies. And then on the other side, how big companies and executives in established companies, how do they defend themselves from all this digital disruption happening in all markets, in all industries, in all countries that I've observed.
So I look forward to digging right into that, because I think that is really important. As you know, a lot of business owners listen to, and leaders inside businesses listen to this podcast. So let's jump right into that. My first question is going to be this. As you are researching and working with companies, because I know you've consulted with a lot of companies, you refer to some of them in the book and so forth, those that you've researched and so forth. What opportunities and challenges do you see that they're facing that they need to be aware of, and then how should they be responding in general?
So, today what is happening is most of the executives of large established companies, they're pretty worried about being disrupted. And basically, what is being disrupted? How do you identify a company that's being disrupted? Disruption occurs when two things occur. First, when a big established company loses a tremendous amount of market share and in a short period of time. So we're not talking about in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. Coca-Cola would launch a product, steal 2% of market share points from Pepsi. BMW launches a car, steal from 3% points from Audi, Mercedes. They launch another car. There's back and forth. That's the standard game of competition. What has happened in the past 10 or 12 years or so is a startup comes and out of nowhere, in a matter of 2, 3, 4, 5 years, steals 10, 20, 30% points from market leaders. So when Dollar Shave Club came about from an entrepreneur that knew nothing about razor blades, he, in a matter of 5 or 6 years, he amassed 55% points of market share of online razor sales. Obviously, that took a lot of toll from Gillette. And we see these big examples of disruption. So to your question is, the opportunity is first to understand what is going on. In my view, large executives are actually thinking that technology is disrupting their companies. And after visiting all these startups and then talking to the executives, I learned that technology is not disrupting market. It's not technology, right? And then the opportunity is really to understand, to eventually respond effectively to that.
Right. And in your book, Unlocking the Customer Value Chain, you give a ton of examples of this. So let's go through a couple things that are terminologies that you have in the book. So first of all, disrupting, you just explained that. Explain decoupling.
Sure. To explain decoupling, I have to explain what is the customer value chain. What is the title of the book? What does it mean, right? So we, as business people, we all know the concept of the customer, the purchase funnel, the customer journey, decision-making process. It's the series of activities that consumers have to go through in order to buy products and services, right? If I have to buy a flat screen TV, I have to first realize that I need one. Then I have to go to a physical store, for example. I have to compare all the options. And then I have to filter on certain criteria. For example, I want a name brand like Samsung. I'll pay only $1,400 for it. And then once I choose one, I need to go pay for it. I need to get it delivered, installed, use, and dispose of it. All these activities are what I call the customer value chain. Now, it's slightly different from the traditional term of customer journey or customer funnel because those end when a customer buys something. And then the company is like, we don't care about anything else that happens after that. You bought from us, and that is our customer journey. Well, the customer value chain has many more steps. Using, disposing of goods and services. It's important to understand all these activities.
Interesting.
And the reason it's important is because when you map out all the activities in this customer value chain, and you can do, by the way, for whatever product or service you're selling, irregardless of what company you are. But then once you look at it, you can classify all these activities into one of three types. It's an activity that it's either creating value for the customer. So for example, me trying different TVs at Best Buy is creating value for me. It's a benefit to me. I appreciate it. It's useful. Also, using the TV obviously creates value for me. But then there's another set of activities that are intended to capture value. Basically, that's the way the company makes money. So in this case, the way the company makes money or the retailer makes money is when they sell a TV to me. So when I pay for the TV, that's a second activity that is capturing value for me. And then there's a third class of activities that is eroding value. It's those activities that don't create value for me, don't create value, don't capture value for the company that I'm dealing with. They're just a necessary means to the goal. So going to the store doesn't benefit you in any way in and of itself. It's a value eroding activity. When you have to throw away a TV, dispose of it, it doesn't benefit you. It's just something you have to do, right? So when you have to go, in the past you would have to go to Blockbuster to rent movies, and now you do it through Netflix. That was a value eroding activity. So then all of these activities can be classified into value creating, value capturing, and value eroding. right? And why is that important? It's important because no matter what company you are, if you want to get more customers, if you want to retain customers, get more loyal customers, you have to basically do one of three things: increase value creating activities, reduce value charging or value capturing activities, make it cheaper for the customer, or eliminate value eroding activities. So that is the customer value chain, and that's the principle of understanding how customers work and how customers choose companies. And then when you ask, what is decoupling? So once I started visiting startups, and the first startup I visited was back in 2010. It was called Facebook, a small startup that was growing pretty fast. I saw Mark Zuckerberg there working in his t-shirt. And from then on, it really, as you probably know,
Right,
everyone
took off.
knows. But so I visited them and I asked them, how were they disrupting markets, right? And they gave me an example. And they explained how they were doing it. They said, we're doing it very unique. And then I visited Netflix, Airbnb. I talked to people at Uber. I visited some other companies that you might not know of, Birchbox and Rebag in New York City. And they all said, we're doing it very differently. But when I looked at the pattern, they were doing the same thing. They were just executing it differently by industry. And what were they doing? They were looking at this customer value chain, and they were figuring out what activity can we do better than the established companies. And they would choose one or very few of these activities and do it much, much better than the established companies. So in the case of buying a flat screen TV, you would probably go to the established company retailer that is Best Buy. Best Buy was very good at many things, for example, with their salespeople helping you find what TV you want. But Best Buy might not be the best one in actually selling you the TV because their prices are probably higher. And so Amazon comes in with these apps and says, you should practice showrooming. You should go to the Best Buy store, figure out what TV you want, pull out your phone, and then figure out if we offer it cheaper. Click the button, buy it from us, and then we'll ship it to you. So Amazon decided to do that better, right? So decoupling is breaking the links of the customer value chain activities and choosing to do one much, much better than the competitors.
That's really interesting. In the book, you talk about the Best Buy example. You're going to have to probably correct me on this, but they lost 4% of the profit for that year or whatever it was. They had a lot of people coming in the stores. You were talking about how it was packed. The stores, they had so many customers. But what they didn't anticipate was that strategy by Amazon, which was people would go into an established store, check out the products, and then they would order it from Amazon, preferably, right? That's the whole.
Absolutely, and that's what we all do now. At the time, it was something unique for a retailer to deal with.
Right.
But today, studies showed that 60 to 70% of the people practice showrooming on a regular basis. They go to a store, they figure out what they want to buy, pull out their phone, and they see if they can buy it online cheaper. That is disruptive.
That is very disruptive. I wrote in one of my books, If You Think You Can. I don't know, you may be familiar with this, and I'll just read it. And I just would be interested to get your take on this. I was referring to a book called Paradigms by Joel Barker. He points out in 1968, Switzerland dominated the world in watchmaking. In fact, the Swiss held 65% of the marketplace and more than 80% of the profits. For over 100 years, they were known for their watchmaking excellence. Then, within a mere 10 years, their market share plummeted to less than 10%, leading to layoffs and 50,000 out of 65,000 employees within 3 years. This would be an example of a huge disruption, right?
Absolutely.
And how did it come about? Going back to Paradigms, I write, today, America and Japan dominate the world of watchmaking. This is a couple years old, so that might have changed just a little bit. But Joel asked the question, how did this switch happen? Why did the Swiss, who dominated so massively, lose it almost overnight? And he said, because of their beliefs prevented them from acting urgently on a new discovery, which was the Swiss had the mechanism and the mainspring, but then there was a big conference where quartz watches came out, and Switzerland did not see the benefit of the quartz watches, and they didn't act on it. Yet America and Japan did at the time. Any thoughts on that? Does that trigger anything?
No, I think it's a classical example. We all know it now, and it's amazing how basically it was disruption within a whole country, right? The Swiss economy was really, you struggled after that and never came back to what it was. And eventually what they had to do is respond by saying, we're not going to be in the functional watchmaking anymore. They killed, this disruption killed, dozens and dozens of watchmakers. And the only ones to survive were the ones that decided to become what they now call timepieces, which is essentially they're selling jewelry. They're not selling watches anymore. It's jewelry, and they survive by that. But yes, they were aware. They knew they had engineers working on quartz as well, but basically it was against what they represented as what they thought was valuable. That goes back to something very interesting and important, TJ, in general across industries. What makers, what manufacturers, particularly what engineers think are valuable is not what consumers think is valuable. So that's why I always advocate for executives when I visit companies to say, map out the customer value chain and figure out where are customers getting value. Not where do you think you're providing value, where customers say they're getting value and where they say they are not getting value. What are those activities? Because customers will tell you, I'm getting value from this, I'm not getting value, this is not good, this is good, this is not good, right? So for example, in beauty products, basically Sephora dominates, and Sephora always thought that they had this benefit. They were really good at teaching you. You go to the store, they have these beauty consultants. They'll teach you how to put on creams, mascara, lipstick, and all these things. And they do it for free, by the way, because then you choose what products and you buy it with them. But in about 2011, more or less, these two entrepreneurs from Harvard Business School decided to create a subscription for sample beauty products, because they said people don't want to go to the store all the time and spend all this time figuring out what they want to buy. They want to do it in the convenience of their own home. So Birchbox came about by creating a subscription service of sample beauty products, not full size, because they wanted to make it easy for women and now men to sample beauty products at home. And then when they want to decide, I like this beauty product, I can buy it full size on Amazon or Sephora or anywhere else. Again, decoupling going on. Birchbox is just saying, we want to be the best at helping you sample beauty products, not all of the other activities of the customer.
That's really good.
And that's why it's disruptive, because they find something to be much better at. And if you're an entrepreneur, you don't have the money, the people, the resources to say, I'm going to take on, I'm a Ford, I'm going to take on Hyatt, Hilton, I'm going to take on Sephora, Best Buy, I'm going to build these stores, I'm going to build cars, I'm going to build hotels. No, they just figured out one sliver of this activity that they could enter and do a much better service. And they disrupted the market by stealing customer activities.
That's really cool. And that's well described there. Two things come to my mind. First of all, in your book, great book here. Let me just make sure I show it up here. Unlocking the Customer Value Chain. You say here, focusing on customers helps us understand more deeply whether startups will succeed or fail. Stealing customers from incumbents. You title it incumbents, which are the big companies, the brand companies, the established big companies. But I love what you say about Birchbox and so forth. You have a lot of other examples in here, right? We could talk about, I wrote down here, Blue Apron or Chef D or HelloFresh, right? They didn't try to change the whole market. They picked one strategy, one piece of that value chain that they said they could do differently or do better. Yeah. And that gives hope, right? I mean, just pick one thing that you can do better and you'll make an impact.
That's right. And in their case of all of these subscription meal companies, we're seeing challenges whether they're profitable or not. And that's another story. What they've identified is that people wanted to eat healthy, to know what ingredients they were, and they wanted to do a part of the cooking, because basically American families pretty much gave away cooking at home as an activity. In the 50s and 60s, it was a big thing, right. Women's emancipation, going to work, and everybody working, and nobody has time to cook anymore. And basically cooking just went out the window, right? today restaurants, sell more food than grocery stores. That's shocking.
Yeah.
But what you lose is this ability to have this connection to food. The thing is, you don't have 1 to 2 hours every day to do it. And so they realize that some people want to do some cooking, but don't want to spend all that much time. And so with these subscription meals, I don't know if you've done one yourself, you get all the products, all the items washed and cut and everything, and you take 15 to 20 minutes to create a meal, and you're happy about creating sort of a homemade meal, but they did part of the work, right? So it's not a restaurant, it's not a grocery store. They picked a very specific thing. We are going to give you the ingredients and the recipe. You spend 15 minutes and you're good about yourself to feeding your family with a home cooked meal in a very convenient format.
That's amazing. I mean, that can even bleed into Uber and Lyft and so forth. I mean, here
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Uber could have come up with the idea, well, we want to drive people, so we'll hire drivers, we'll create cars, we'll do all these things. They said, no. Let the other guys do all of that. We just want to connect somebody who needs a ride with somebody who's willing to give a ride. Again, a very small sliver of all of the customer value chain, and they do it much, much better. And they steal, and this is important, TJ, the new game in town of disruption in all these markets is not stealing customers per se. It's not, again, like Coke stealing a customer from Pepsi or BMW stealing it from Audi. It's stealing customer activities.
Right.
Right? Amazon, when they sell you a TV, you're still going to Best Buy. So Best Buy didn't technically lose the customer. It's still going to their stores.
You said in the book it's a shared customer.
It's a shared customer, exactly.
Right.
And so but you know how shared customer loses a lot of money for the established company. So it's not like it's something good. It's something, very disruptive. And that brings the point that a few things that I've learned throughout the process in writing this book. Number one, as everybody else thought, technology disrupts markets. I thought it was that. New technologies.
Innovations. Right.
Some companies win them, but that's really not the case, because we're seeing that, the big companies have the same technology. At the time, the Swiss watchmakers had the access to the quartz, and the Japanese watchmakers chose to use it much better, right? To your point. But like many other industries that you see, like the companies that create the CAT scanner was not the company that succeeded. Based on that, Kodak created the digital camera, was not the company that succeeded. So it's not technology that disrupts markets. It's actually customers that are disrupting markets. When you arrive at Boston Airport and you choose to call an Uber instead of the taxi, you are disrupting the market in your own little way. And when you do that many times and then a million people do that, that's how the downfall of the taxi industry came about. The same thing when you say, I'm going on vacation, instead of looking for a hotel, let me look for an Airbnb rental, you're disrupting markets. When you're a consumer that say, I just want beauty products, samples of beauty products at my house, I'm not going to go to the store, you're disrupting markets. Customers disrupt markets, not technology. And it's not the startups that are disrupting the markets. The startups are just faster at delivering what customers want.
Right. You make that point in the book. They're very agile. They're quick. They move. In my world, consulting with companies, right, there's some themes that I see, although I've been in many industries. For example, I've learned working in the automobile industry that, at least up here in Seattle area, I don't know across the country what it's like, but we have major dealerships up here moving away from sales professionals to kiosks, where a person can come in, push a few buttons, exactly what it is they want, and then basically take it over to the desk or however all that works, and they get the car. They don't have to deal with a salesperson. Have you seen that in your research?
Absolutely. This is like a global phenomenon. And I wrote a Harvard Business School case on Nissan just to highlight this point to my students. Basically, 20 years ago, the average American would visit about 7 dealers before purchasing a brand new car.
Right.
Guess what number it is today? Do you have any? How many dealers? Well, last time you bought a car, TJ, how many dealers did you visit?
One.
That's the modal number. The average is actually 1.4.
Oh, is it really? Okay.
Yeah.
I
You're
knew,
close.
yeah, because
Yeah.
I knew I had already searched online. I was pre-sold. I just said, this is honey, I said to my wife, right? I said, this is the car that I want. We have the money to pay for it. Well, let's just go down and basically write a check. And so we went down to the dealership. They wanted to show me different cars. I said, no, this is the car I want. They even wanted me to get a loan on the car. I said, I don't want a loan. This is exactly what I want. And what I've learned working in the automobile industry, because I do training in there, is that in a sense, you really don't have to pre-qualify customers anymore, right? They come in pre-qualified. They've already done their research. Your job then is to listen to them, find out what their needs are, what their wants are, whatever that value chain is to them, and then help them get their needs and their wants taken care of.
That's right. And you are a very prototypical customer. And that point that I just said, you just disrupted the auto industry. Because what you're explaining is that in the past, we used to make our decisions, what car to buy, what brand of car to buy in the dealership. Now you make it at home.
Yeah.
Make it at home. So there's no point in, let me see other cars at the dealership. Let me negotiate. Let me do no. I've already made all the decisions. Essentially, a car dealer today is just fulfillment of your needs. Basically, they said, what do you want? Here it is.
Basically.
In the past, they would try to help you decide and figure out, and they would try to upsell you. That's gone. All of those customer value chain activities for buying a car you made at home. And when you arrive, you just like you're saying, I need some toilet paper. Can you get it from the shelf over there? And that's it. They're like, no, let me show you some options of toilet paper. Nobody does that anymore. Cars have become just like, supermarkets, just a fulfillment center.
Which is really interesting, because when you work with salespeople, you talk about building the value through emotion and finding out what their wants, and you take all that out. I wonder long-term, maybe you have some research on it, but long-term, what is going to be the threat or the challenge for these incumbent dealerships who have, you got some that are changing to this kiosk, some are staying true with those salespeople. I wonder, have you seen any long-term effects of this that you foresee happening down the road?
So in my book, TJ, I talk about, I give an example of the auto industry, but I talk it broadly, the point that auto executives, not the dealers, but the auto executives in the makers are really struggling with all these new technologies. And they're talking about electric cars because Tesla is disrupting our business.
Right, okay.
Turns out Tesla is not, because Tesla sells a small amount, and they all have electric cars that are on the pipeline or they're selling. And then they say autonomous vehicles are going to disrupt our business, so we invest in autonomous vehicles. And, that might eventually happen, it might not. Nobody knows at this point in time. The bigger disruption is consumers, particularly the younger ones, are starting to question whether they need a car. Yeah. When I was 18 or 21, and we didn't question, do I need a car? I want a car, I guarantee. But now younger consumers are questioning, do I even need a car, or can I just deal with my transportation needs through Uber and Lyft and other mechanisms, right? Electric scooters and so on and so forth, e-bikes. So the biggest disruption that happens in any industry is when your customers start to question whether they're even necessary to enter your category. Do I need a car? Do I need a second vacation home or not? Right? It's not which one do I want, right?
Yeah, that's good. Airbnb, right? Yes. I can pay X amount, this sometimes less than it costs to go to a hotel, and I can stay in a beautiful home.
So I asked that question for myself on the watch industry. I don't wear watches anymore. I just said, do I need a watch? And then at some point in time, I said no. And, millions of other people are having this question. And when many of them said no, you're really destroying a whole industry, because there's no point in them competing with each other. What design, what price, all of these things, it doesn't matter anymore, right? So back to the auto industry, it's like this question. When people think that a car is like an elevator, I don't need an elevator. I don't need my own elevator. It's just like, it's costly. And the cost of ownership of the car has been very, very high. And these companies like Uber and Lyft, they're thinking their premise is there's too many cars in the world today. What is the problem is they're inefficiently allocated towards the uses and the people that need them. The average car in the US is being used about 4% of its time.
Oh,
So
you're
4%
kidding.
of the time, a car is actually being driven. The rest, it's parked, or it's in a garage, or it's in traffic, stuck in traffic, not being effectively used. Now, imagine you if you're the manufacturing manager of a factory,
Right.
and you buy an expensive piece of machinery, and your boss says, TJ, how often, what percentage of time is that machine that you paid $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 being used? And you're like, 4%. If you said that, you would get fired, my friend. Right? Very inefficient use. When you go to airplanes, depending on the airline, uses it 20, 30, 40% of the time, right? And so Airbnb is like, we need to transform 4% into 15, 20, 30, eventually 40%. And if that happens, the need for cars around the world will drastically reduce. And the auto manufacturers that are in the business of manufacturing cars need to move to doing something else, or they're going to die a slow death like the watch companies.
Exactly. And so you even bring up in the book, you talk about Zipcar. I mean, here's another example of someone who took a slice, and now you can go get a car and you can drive it if you need it, and then turn it back in. You don't have to worry about fueling, you wrote in the book. You don't have to worry about a number of things. So that's really cool. Another industry that I'm working in, and I don't know how this shapes out, but I work in the trucking and transportation industry. And one thing I'm noticing as I work with, so there's two sides. There's those that own assets. So they have a fleet of 5,000 trucks.
Mm-hmm.
But now some of these companies are also creating logistic companies, sister companies, if you will. They don't own any assets, but what they're finding is, for example, I work with a company in Utah they see it as moving the transportation of goods industry to the Uber industry model. Kind of, if we already can find a truck, whether it's with a competitor or not, that's moving from point A to point B, and they have room on that truck, and we have a product on the way that can be delivered to their endpoint or whatever, can we save money rather than own the actual asset? We're just taking on to other resources.
Yeah, that's what I call asset utilization. So the percentage of time that expensive asset is being utilized divided by the available time that could actually be utilized. Right. And so the car, on average, a car is utilized about 4%. Right? There's a lot of inefficiencies in the world, like warehouses and trucks on the industrial and business to business side, but also on the consumer side. If you just look at things like trailers, right? Home, these motor homes. What is the average utilization of motor homes? It's pretty low, about 5 to 10%. Think about even not industrial equipment at all. Think about a student of mine created a business by buying and reselling luxury handbags. These are handbags that women pay $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, even $20,000 for. And what he realized is there's thousands and thousands of women that have, on average 20, 25 handbags that are at least $1,000 a piece that they're not utilizing. So the asset utilization is very low. And he said, I'm going to come in and I'm going to offer to buy those handbags and resell it to somebody else. Because in his view, all of the luxury handbag industry has overserved the population. There's too many handbags, and he's just going to pick one handbag from one place and put it another way, and so on, to increase asset utilization. And that's his business. Is he going to manufacture luxury handbags to compete with the supplies? He's just going to switch them around, just like the trucking company that you're talking about.
Exactly. Wow, that's really cool. Okay, one thing you talk about in here, I'm just going to read a quote.
Okay.
By the way, let me show the book again. There we go. Make sure you get a copy. Okay. You say, You don't need to be the best class in everything you do, nor should you initially aspire to do that. Just ensure that your original offering, which won over your customers in the first place, remain better than the rest. I find that really interesting because last month or so, I read Jim Collins's book called How the Mighty Fall. I think that's the title. I'm going off my memory here, but How the Mighty Fall. And he makes the point, which agrees with you, that these companies that he's researched, they got away from, and maybe you can speak to the pros and cons of it, they got away from their core genius, right? Or their core element. And because of that, they delved into this and delved into new territories while they totally let go of some of their core offerings that they were really good at in the first place. And that was a pattern of demise for many of these companies. Is that what you've seen in your research?
Yes, but with one caveat. So basically, just to give a little bit context or an example on the quote that you picked up. So Airbnb started, as we all know, by being a marketplace to help people who own homes to rent out those homes to some people that want to just, stay in their homes for a few days or a week or so on vacation. They started getting very good at that. They became, a unicorn, $35 billion valuation. I don't know where they're at. They're going to IPO this year. And you could imagine that they could say, okay, what else? What other markets can we offer the same service? Oh, we could go into the business-to-business market, business travelers who don't want to stay in the hotel. We can offer, apartments that are full service for them. And or we can offer vacation rentals in other countries or so on and so forth. And what they decided to do is the founders looked at it and said, the customer value chain of a person who is traveling for leisure has a series of activities, only one of which is securing a place to stay. But there is the flight, there is the events when they arrive at the city, there's activities, there's figuring out, hanging out with the locals. It's very important. People want to be with the locals, not with around tourists. And so they saw a huge amount of opportunities there. And what they decided to do is they decided to explore other, what I call adjacent activities in the customer value chain, which are next to the ones that we're providing, which is the stay at somebody else's home. And they started to explore those. But you would imagine that, if you're in the business of a platform that offers real estate rental places, and you're going to go now offer tourist activities in certain cities, you're not good at that. You don't have no clue how to do that. You don't have the skill sets. They decided to do anyway, because what they wanted is to increase the relationship with their customers by offering more and more activities in the customer value chain. So the decoupling is the way you start, by entering in one sliver and doing it better. But how does Airbnb grow? It grows to the other ones, the other activities, in a process I call coupling. Yes. And in coupling, they do other activities, but they don't need to be best in class because their customer is already their customer. So they don't need to create, for example, a much better travel agency or a much better website to book tickets. All they need to do is to create a reasonable one that they can integrate into their platform. And then the customer doesn't need to go. Just like when I travel, I'm looking at flights in one, I'm looking at TripAdvisor, another website, what to do. I'm looking at Airbnb. I have all these tabs and I'm trying to figure out dates and things. If I could do it in one place easily, I'd be glad to do it. And each of those activities, it doesn't need to be better than TripAdvisor. It doesn't need to be better than Expedia. It doesn't need to be better service. It just needs to be easy for me to integrate everything. In that regard, when you go into branch out into new activities, this process of coupling, it's beautiful that you don't need to be best in class in everything you do.
Because you're saying because you already have those customers.
You already have those, and they don't want something better than the alternative. They just want something easier, more integrated, more convenient.
And people
right?
pay totally. People pay for convenience, right? And if you're already used to using this company, why would I go over here if they offer it here? It just that makes sense. So that's coupling.
Yeah, and this is a strategy, by the way, that Google does, Amazon does. They create all these new services, and they're not generally better than the best available alternative outside. They're just good enough that the customer's like, yeah, I'm already buying these things on Amazon. I might buy these other things as well. You know, when Amazon came with books, it was the cheaper bookseller. But then when it came into electronics, it's not always the cheaper electronic seller. If you want, you should check the prices when buying electronics. Amazon often sells electronics more expensive than Best Buy and the alternatives. But you're already there. It's convenient. So, you know, you do essentially a supermarket one-stop shop. You know, I know, yes, I could go to another supermarket to buy Coca-Cola. I'm here anyway. I'm just buying this one.
Wow, that's really powerful. And I thought it was really interesting. I really hadn't thought about it before, which we talked about in the beginning with showrooming. You talked about the going to other stores to find out if you want that product in the first place and then purchasing it. You know, I do that all the time where I'll go to a store, I'll see something, and I'll go to Amazon. It's relatively the same, maybe sometimes it's the same price, but I can hit add to cart and then check out. And 2 days later, it'll be at my house or my office.
That's right. So couple these activities to make it easy for you. And now you're integrating the customer value chain more and more with Amazon, displacing other retailers.
Powerful, right? Powerful, powerful. Okay, we're starting to wind up or wind down. There's another quote here. Let me just read this and then get your feedback on it. As scholars in the discipline of motivational psychology have found, people will freely perform a desired task only if two conditions are satisfied. First, they must first possess the basic skills and resources to perform the task. Lacking the ability to perform the task, they may attempt it, but they certainly won't succeed. Second, if a person can perform the task, they must want to do it. That's the want to aspect, right? The value to them. It follows that to motivate employees to focus on customers' needs, companies must equip them to do so and provide proper incentives. Now, let me continue to go on. And the reason I'm reading this in part is because I spend a lot of time inside organizations, whether it be in the area of just general performance or attitudes or customer service, right? That's a big one. Just 2 weeks ago, I interviewed Horst Schulze, who's the co-founder of the Ritz-Carlton Hotels. That interview will be coming out soon. This has to do with culture. Creating a culture within a company that allows the frontline workers to notice deficiencies or listen to customers in such a way and make sure that that improvement or that idea that maybe a customer is suggesting makes its way up to decision makers, right? So you say this, to equip employees to favor the customer's evolving needs and wants, companies must put a great deal at the employee's disposal, including opportunities to observe and connect with customers, intellectual approaches for understanding customers, and responding to their demands. And it goes on, and you'll need to read the book so that you can get the rest of this. But what I heard you say is something that I'm seeing within organizations. You leaders have to create, so this is a leadership principle, you have to create a culture where the customers, number one, are truly valued, that we truly seek to know what their needs and wants are so that we can adjust appropriately. It's not just, as you say in the book, competing against, let's say, just for an example, BMW trying to take from Mercedes, right? It's finding out what the customers really want and need and providing that within the resources and confines of whatever you offer.
Now, that is very hard to do. I've learned over time that getting the leaders to impute this both capacity and motivation for employees to do, that is very hard. And I've asked many people, academics and others, I said, what is company culture? What is it? How do you define it? I've gotten so many different answers, and none of them I remember, to be honest. The one that I do remember is a very easy one. What is company culture? It's what employees do when nobody's looking.
Totally.
Right? So when you're in the room alone, nobody's looking, your boss is not there, it's like, what are you doing, TJ? Whatever you do, you decide to do, that is company culture, because that is kind of like your natural inclination, right? And many companies that I've seen, they all say that they're customer centric. We all care about our customers. We all focus primarily on them. But when nobody's looking, they make decisions that are against the customer's interest, right? The Volkswagen scandal was against consumers' interest. I'm buying a diesel car and I think it's very, good for the planet, and then you just scammed me, right? The same thing with Wells Fargo, creating fake accounts on behalf of customers. That is the company culture, right? And so how do you change company culture? First, there's no way about it. Just like kids, you have to train them and help them. And then you set back and you observe how they behave when nobody's looking, right? And you need to be customer centric. You need to provide the tools. And one of the big tools is actually being close to customers. If employees are far away from customers, there's no way for them to be fully customer centric, right? Imagine when you sell something, right? Like if you're selling a manufactured product, you make it, you sell it to a distributor, the distributor sells it to the retailer sells it to the consumer, and maybe the consumer buys it for somebody else that uses it. You're very far removed from those people.
Right.
So Intuit, a tax software development company, they have something that's called Follow Me Homes. They force their employees to go to the homes of people that are buying, using, and complaining about their own software, and they just observe. Right. So you have to have these programs and tools to allow people to want to be customer centric. And then the hard part is how to motivate them to want to be customer centric even when nobody's looking.
That's really powerful. What I find, it seems like oftentimes there's a lack of transparency. There's a lack of truly giving employees the power to think in a way, to have opinions, to bring ideas to the table. And good leaders, many that I work with are visionary leaders. They love their people, but they also have a strong sense of purpose and passion for why the organization exists. And so for leaders listening, just make sure that you take Thales's advice here. Let me just say, there is so much in this book. And what I loved about it as I was reading it is, for every principle that you share, like a new forward-thinking principle, you share 2 or 3 examples in the real world of where organizations were affected by that or improved by that. I love that, because so I would just say for anyone listening to this podcast, get this book, especially if you're a leader, right? Thales gives a clear view of what to look forward to inside in terms of the future, and what customers want, and what you should be focusing on as a leader of your company to stay ahead of where the market is going. I think you've done a good job laying that out here. Now,
thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So I'm just going to ask you in closing, but before I do, I'm going to ask you this: are there any last thoughts or ideas that you want to give our audience and those listening? But before we go there, I'm going to take you back in time for a second and just ask a quick question. This is totally not related to the book, so I'm being selfish here, if that's okay. How is it possible that a small family of 3 kids, let's just say, so let me just back up and say, I have 2 young daughters. I have 2 older boys that have since moved out, but 2 young daughters that are at home. They don't watch TV anymore. They watch YouTube channels, and what they particularly watch are cool families that have kids, and it's just these 10-minute videos of these kids doing ridiculously simple things like washing the parents' car, or making slime was a big thing for a while, right? Why do these videos, what should entrepreneurs that are probably listening to this keep in mind in terms of getting their videos to go viral? Are there any research or thoughts that come to mind?
So that brings me back in time into a few years ago when I actually started doing research on viral marketing. I came out with a first article, and it got a lot of attention. My article went viral, which was funny. But it's on the Harvard Business Review. It's called The New Science of Viral Advertising. At the time, it was new. This is like 2010, 11.
Sure.
It was when companies wanted to figure out exactly what you're trying to understand. And I provide 5 principles of how can you bake, quote unquote, bake virality into your video content.
Right.
And there's a few elements to do that. But one of the big factors is partially the content, but partially how you market your own content. You market your own video. And what I realized after doing experiments to try to engineer virality is basically virality is fundamentally a human innate desire for certain benefits for those people who are going to share your video. The video will only go viral if enough people decide to share with not 1 or 2 people, but with many others. So I share it with 5. Some of them are not going to share it, but there's at least 1 or 2 that are going to share it with 20 or 30 people. And those people are going to share it with 50, and then it goes on. And the reason people do that, as I've come to learn, is by and large very self-interested motivations. They do it to look cool, to look smart, to be, I was the one who found this, and so I'm going to share it with the video for you, and I hope that you'll remember how cool I am, or I'm very intelligent when I share intelligent videos about, new business ideas, for example, or I want people to think me as a very progressive person. I share certain types of things. So whenever you're creating a video, you need to bake into the video the content that will make the people that you want to share your video a lot, for them to kind of get a benefit out of sharing in a very self-interested manner. So these slimes, these goofy things, like kids are looking to each other to see who is the person that found the video for the first time, because that thing, the thing that happens when everybody knows of it. That's not the cool kid. The cool kid is the one who found it in the first place. And they generally find it in obscure locations. So one tip is, when you want a video to go viral, don't post it on Facebook. Because when somebody sees it on Facebook, they think, oh, other people already seen this, I'm not going to share it. Post it on a very obscure website. Let it be found. And those people who find it in this obscure place will think they found something cool and want to share it with everybody before others do. And that creates the process of viral propagation.
Maybe this is too bold of a question, so I apologize ahead of time. What would be an obscure website? When you think of it, what does that picture look like?
Oh, for example, Tumblr. Do you go to Tumblr all the time? Tumblr, Reddit? If these are not mainstream social networks, right? Got it. Kind of these places are the places where virality starts to bubble up. And then when it goes to Facebook, the work is done, because Facebook will, do itself, but you want to kind of craft it in, and hiding it is very important to let people finding it and then bring it in, because everybody is self-interestedly trying to somehow propagate some aspect of their personality that they want others to see, and they're using your videos as the conduit to doing that. It's not, I'm going to create a great video, post it online, everybody, and they're going to love it and share it. It's
that
much
work that way.
But my article should offer you at least 5.
I will go read that article. I appreciate that. So thanks for taking that kind of out of the box question there. Okay, so I've got some research to do there that will be interesting. I just want to say it was great having you on the show. What are some last thoughts that you would give to our listeners, those leaders, entrepreneurs that are probably listening to this podcast?
Sure. Just a few. Number one, remember, digital disruption is not a technologically driven phenomenon. It's about customers, so you need to understand customers, engage with customers, and the customer value chain and a series of other tools that I provide in the book are a way to do that.
Right.
Remember, you need a process in your company. You need processes and you need frameworks to work on these things, because if you don't have this in any organization, what happens is the way decisions become made is through politics. And politics is the worst way to make decisions. So you need to have processes, and I have processes in the book. Your problem, if you're being disrupted by startups, it is a customer problem and a business model problem. So the way to solve business model problems is going back to the basics of business. Don't think that you can buy or rent or acquire technologies to solve your business problems. You will only solve it with business. Go back to your training, go back to your experience in business. That is where things will come out. And then number 3, what is happening is customers are going from market to market and making decisions. So when they start using Amazon, they have a higher tendency to use Airbnb. And when they use these 2 apps, they have a higher tendency to using Uber, and then so on and so forth. And so they migrate from category to category with the same behavior. So you have to not just focus on your own industry. Open your vantage point and look at adjacent industries. Look at other industries that are something happening that is coming to your industry. You have to stop focusing 95% of your attention only on your industry. You have to broaden, and those are the 3 takeaways that I recommend.
That's really great. Thank you, Thales, for being on the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. Where should people go to get your book? Where would you?
So, we talked a lot about Amazon. Amazon, definitely just, Google my name, or go on Amazon, search for my name, or Unlocking the Customer Value Chain. Or if you don't like purchasing things on Amazon, you can just go on decoupling.co and look where to find my book elsewhere. But TJ, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. I'm glad you liked the book, and I hope you send me any feedback online. Go to my Harvard website as well, and any new thoughts or new disruptive ideas or businesses. I want to capture as many as possible to learn more.
I will do. We'll stay in touch. Anyway, thank you for being on the show, and I wish you success going forward.
Thank you.
All right. You bet. Bye-bye.